Today's Quran study. We'll be reading from Surah 23, the believers, starting at verse 19. Let's all seek refuge in God from Satan rejected. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. With it, we produce for you orchids of date palms, grapes, all kinds of fruits, and various foods. Also, a tree native to Sinai produces oil as well as relish for the eaters. And the livestock should provide you with a lesson. We let you drink milk from their bellies. You derive other benefits from them, and some of them you use for food on them and on the ships you ride. So, these are all the innumerable blessings from God that are so freely given to us, right? And, like, imagine like being created, as we are, or in some other type of life form that is just in this uh vortex or something of not having any of these provisions, not having colors, not having eyesight or hearing, but you're a creature and you don't have all these tasty foods. So these are really innumerable blessings, because it could have God doesn't have to do this for any of us, but he provides for us, and he gives us not just one food, but he gives us all kinds of fruits, and different shapes, tastes, textures, because some people have certain palate preferences. So these are all very wonderful things to thank God for. So, being truly appreciative for this is what um, is what a submitter, a believer, is going to think about, and how they're going to be, because in the same kind of way, if brought to the hereafter, like if uh you know um in heaven, like with these, if everybody on the earth, or everybody that ever lived was just thrown in heaven, you know there, among the disbelievers on this earth and that have passed away, right, and that are unappreciative, they probably would have turned unappreciative in heaven at some point, right? Like the truly bad people, they would have had like even things like greater, much, much greater, right? Allegorically speaking, too, that we couldn't fathom. And then they would still, they would perhaps, be unappreciative or complain about this food or that food, about not having, eventually at some point, um, or turn into disbelievers at some point. So this is, of uh, uh, like this life is also, we know it prepares us for the hereafter, but also we you know we and God gave us a precious second chance here. But if you can, the point what I'm trying to say here is like, if you can be appreciative, the old saying, being appreciative for even the Quran is very clear on this. When that, tests, right, the two ends of the testing spectrum, and in testing through adversity and lack of money, we will surely test you through some fear, lack of money, hardship, times of uncertainty, etc. And says, give good news to the steadfast and appreciative. So in the same way, the people who can be appreciative for seemingly like very little, and the reason why I said very little is because nothing's very little, right? Even if you just have maybe like two fruits, or you don't have too much food in your refrigerator, or this or that, or if you don't have too much money, you're still gonna find ways to be grateful. Like you're still living like a king, really, like a king. So these are the people, God willing, uh, like these type of people, that providing their submitters and believers, and they make it to heaven, they're going to be, infinitely appreciative in heaven. And so being in this world prepares us, like growing our soul to when we can withstand God's physical presence and be like one of the things, like we ask God to perfect our light. So, because if we look back at the verse 18, innumerable blessings from God. So we don't, we recognize the innumerable blessings here in this world, even though, what the hereafter uh, possesses, God willing, in heaven, we all make it is way, way better, and it's like, so, we've heard the old saying, if you can be grateful for and steadfastly persevere, and I'm not talking about like, like wanting to things to taste better and improve, maybe you could taste some bad food or something that's not uh correct, and you're looking for ways to make it taste better, or I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, like people, like the disbelievers who are profoundly unappreciative, and they don't think about God when they're eating the grapes. They don't think about the date palms. They don't think about how they were created. They don't think about, they don't ever give thought to that. I'm not saying we should do this every single time, right? We eat something or we ride on livestock, right? Even though we probably, most of us here don't use horses and stuff, like we see in verse 21 about drinking milk. The appreciative ones are the ones who remember God, right? I mean, you could drink spoiled milk or something, or taste something bad from somewhere, and you say something that's not being unappreciative. That's like, making an analysis, like, look, this isn't correct, this isn't good, or this place is has better quality. That's fine. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, most humans are disbelieving in God. They don't think about God. They don't recognize and think about how the milk was created just for us. Like He subdued these animals. So this is the difference. You know, um, and I mean, God willing, these people who, um, who don't think like this and who aren't in submission or in the faith can eventually get the right message and be appreciative. You know? And this makes us happy too, when we read about this stuff and we think about this stuff and how good and how easy we have it. I mean, just air conditioner, or heat for that matter. I mean, this is really a blessing. We sent Noah to his Noah. We sent Noah to his people, saying, "Oh, my people, worship God. You have no other God beside him. Would you not be righteous?" The leaders who disbelieved among his people said, "This is no more than a human like you who wants to gain prominence among you. Had God willed, he could have sent down angels. We never heard of anything like this from our ancestors. He's simply a man gone crazy. Just ignore him for a while." So we can see, the typical response of how these people act. And just, it's interesting how they resort immediately to thinking Noah, if the reminding became too much for these people, they couldn't handle it. They resort to something, tricking their people and saying, "Oh, he's just showing off, or he wants to gain prominence." That's the same thing. Because that's why people show off, right? Why show offs is because they boast because they want to impress others and gain some type of uh, they want to gain some type of food, or for their ego, right? They want to feed the wrong um their priorities are mixed up, they want to feed the wrong thing. But we can see the response for these people, and where it caused them to go astray. And also, they're also referring back to doing the same thing, following what their parents taught. We never heard anything like this from our ancestors. So basically, it's like, who is this guy? Who is he to tell us what to do? You know, um, they also insult him, saying he's crazy, and ignore him. Verse 26, he said, "My Lord, grant me victory, for they have disbelieved me." We then inspired him, make the watercraft under our watchful eyes, And in accordance with our inspiration, when our command comes and atmosphere boils up, put on it a pair of every kind of your domesticated animals and your family, except those condemned to be doomed. Do not speak to me on behalf of those who transgress, you will be drowned. So this one is a footnote. Verse 27, the storytellers have created a mockery of Noah's history. Noah's Ark was a flat watercraft made of logs tied together with primitive ropes. Surah 54, verse 13. The flood was local around the Dead Sea area, and animals were Noah's domesticated animals. You see, because if Satan, Satan was behind this mockery, and I mean, of course, humans partook into it too, the people that fabricated this story. And this is very, this is like also touched on a book I recently started reading, The Myth of God Incarnate, which was, for any Christians tuned in or dialed in, this is a good book to help. But basically, it's the same fundamental thing that Christianity, in order to stay relevant and it has evolved over time. It has changed. So meaning anything that changes is the message and stuff, and this is where the deification of Jesus and all of this, this eloquently way of expressing their devotion and stuff. This is where it came in, and it's just and then people, of course, and with their idol worship tendencies ran with it. But much more than that, but we can see it's the same thing. How the storytellers have basically created a mockery and, for whatever reason, try to make it sound more interesting or appealing to people or whatever. It causes a lot of people to use this as a basis of their argument, right? Mainly atheists to fight or oppose the truth. And, for a point, they're, it works because like I've even seen Christians like debate amongst each other, and it was just very silly. They were asking like they were talking about these contraptions, um, and like these. This was like a couple years ago. I was having dinner with some of these people, and then I was about to leave because I was like, this is vain talk, and I wasn't saying anything, and so close to leaving, and then somehow the right when I was like thinking as the subject changed, or I might have said something, but yeah, like one, they were actually arguing with each other and they were friends. They went to the same, I was invited for dinner and stuff. And I did talk about submission to them here and there, but I didn't realize like at the time they were probably trying to convert me. But anyway, but yeah, this was literally something I witnessed in there. You can see, if you're not a, submitter, or even if you're an agnostic or atheist or something, you're listening to these two people, you would like, man, this is unbelievable. Number one, it's impossible. Number two, and they're talking about these we can see these this is mathematically confirmed, and then God clarifies the truth. And yet again, it's another reason, uh another confirmation that people who go to these outdated sources such as various parts of the Bible, right? The books, whether they're from the canon or non-canonical. If you're going to for a source of religious guidance, or some religious tradition or duty or right, you're setting yourself up for failure, and Satan will somehow capture you at some point. So moving on, so verse 28, once you are settled together with those who are with you on the watercraft, you shall say, praise God for saving us from the evil people, and say, my Lord, let me disembark onto a blessed location. You are the best deliverer. If these should provide sufficient proofs for you, we will certainly put you to the test. Subsequently, we establish another generation after them. So mashallah, this is a really nice uh, thing. We can see that Noah and his people, I mean, they're being told this, but they also, I'm sure they said it too, but they were at, the hills of Judea is where they landed on, and that's in another verse in the Quran. And they were delivered and they were saved from the evil people, And so this is they were praising God, So this is a thing naturally that you know they're not thanking the captain of the ship, which I assume was maybe probably Noah, of course, or the watercraft, I should say, is better watercraft with logs and primitive ropes. Um, but they're praising God, And so this is also a reminder that God is the only one who saves us, from every small little thing or a small disaster or a big disaster, microscopic adversity. It could be very small or gargantuan. I mean, he's the only one who can save us. Not anybody, because he's the only one that possesses power. Remember, la quwwata illa billah. This essentially means God is doing everything. No one has any power to do anything, and even the things that Satan is doing are within God's control. So this is and our job is to worship God alone. That's our mission. That's our objective every day. That is our main objective, is to worship Him alone. And so another generation was established after them. Um, we sent to them. So I think it maybe it was the people of Ad or Thamud, I think came, were the ones that came after them. I don't remember. Pretty much shortly after. We sent to them a messenger, and they were also, Noah's was also a precedent for these people, uh, for Saleh and Hud, and then other messengers that came as warners, both warners and bearers of good news, for the people who repented and followed the right path, and they also, and so these generations, they knew, these subsequent generations, they knew about the previous generation's annihilation, but due to their ego or and just their disbelief in wickedness, they just said, like these afflictions were limited to their ancestors, right? So somehow they were special or they were different. They wouldn't be held accountable. 32, we sent to them a messenger from among them saying, "You shall worship God. You have no other God beside him. Would you not be righteous?" The leaders among his people who disbelieved him and the leaders among his people who disbelieved and rejected the idea of the hereafter, although we provided for them generously in this life, said, "This is no more than a human being like you. He eats from what you eat and drinks as you drink. If you obey a human being like you, then you're really losers." And this is it's ironic because literally these people who are going astray are obeying other human beings like themselves, right? They've set up their leaders as their gods. So here is a human being, like Pharaoh. For this isn't Pharaoh, but just Pharaoh is another example. He thought he was a god, but I mean, even the people here, um, they're contradicting themselves, and they've somehow tricked the people because these people are human beings themselves who are making these uh, you know uh, terrible comments and replies and spreading these lies, and so and they're being obeyed by their congregations and their people. So, but we can see just they don't even think logically like this, and that their minds are blocked because they've chosen to be rejectors. And then, of course, we know they rejected the idea of the hereafter. 35, does he promise you that after you die and turn into dust and bones, you will come out again? Impossible. Impossible indeed is what is promised to you. But so, rarely we can see that these people do even think like where they came from, or that they were once nothing, and that they just came into existence, and so it's just as easily as that happened, it's gonna happen again. That God, just as God created them, he puts them to death, and resurrects them. But we can see, previously from the verse that it's because I think it says due to, no, it just says, and they rejected the idea of the hereafter. 37, we only live this life, we live and die, and we will never be resurrected. He is just a man who fabricated lies and attributed them to God. We will never believe him. So they don't, they live as they live because they don't believe in any accountability, right? So, they don't think they're going to be held accountable, and they don't think they're going to be resurrected, but they're going to be shocked. And this is due to their arrogance too. And it's also interesting to see that they're bearing, or they seemingly bear witness, right? But it's probably just he's just a man who fabricated lies and attribute them to God. So they're actually I guess bearing witness to God's existence, right? Um, but they're disbelievers. You know, and I've seen we can see this in other verses in the responses throughout in other verses in the Quran. But their God is obviously not the Lord of the heavens and the earth, and so you know, he said, "My Lord, grant me victory, for they have disbelieved me." He said, "Soon they will be sorry. The retribution struck them equitably, and thus we turn them into ruins. The wicked people perish. Subsequently, we establish other generations after them. No community can advance its predetermined fate nor delay it. Then we send our messengers in succession. Every time a messenger went to his community, they disbelieved him. Consequently, we annihilated them one after the other and made them history. These people who disbelieve have perished." So this is an immutable law, and invariably it happens to every disbelieving community and wicked community. Once they deserve the retribution, and so it's going to be the same thing, and it is the same thing today. We can see selective annihilation of people through diseases, such as AIDS, that have because you can't overturn the city of San Francisco or what's the other one I just learned about recently? I think in Europe, I think in the Holland or Netherlands or whatever, Amsterdam red light district, whatever it is. Threw out a bunch of names, city names out there, but it's people. Someone y'all know what I'm probably know what I'm referring to or thinking of. But you can't just overturn these cities. So there's still ways to remove these people. But as we know, with the smoke coming, the Arabs have been dismissed from God's grace. The entire oops, the entire uh, Arab people on the entire Arabian Peninsula. All these people have disbelieved and turned wicked, and given ample amount of time too. You know, I mean, we can say several decades at this point, three plus, about a few to several, in between. But we can also see, how long Noah lived and how many, he went to his people for a number of years too, warning his people. We know that as with the case with Noah, it was definitely not just overnight, and it's the same with the Arabs, like they were given, a messenger came, was sent to the whole world, and specifically also for what these people, the book that they had in the Quran, and they had corrupted, and they turned oblivious, and so now it's um, they're being even the things that are happening right now, it's like they're being sauteed for their punishment. Right before you dress up a turkey and you saute these foods and stuff, so they're getting their priming. They're getting because we can. see a lot of the chaos and destruction already starting to ensue in the Middle East. Um, so moving on, verse 45, Moses and Aaron. Then we sent Moses and his brother Aaron with the revelations and a profound proof. I mean, many of them at the end turned wicked, but they were believed, for the time when they escaped the persecution, escaped out of Egypt, where they were at, fled. Well, not fled, but they were, you know, um, they lost a lot of the blessings that they previously had too, later on. But they did believe, I guess, for the time being, with Moses and his brother. But we can see, talking about Moses and Aaron here, they were Pharaoh and his elders and his people rejected them, because they even looked down on him, calling them, saying, oh, who are you? Your people, your group, your people are slaves, basically mocking, condescending, patronizing, and all these things. So basically we can see the fate that they were annihilated. And it's uh I mean, what do really, when we look at these verses and we read this here, we need to think about the common trait and the commonality that have caused people to go astray. And I mean, we can look, it's arrogance, ego, which is arrogance augmented or increased by ignorance, and it goes both ways too, it can go the other way as well. Ignorance, uh, which is increased by your arrogance. So you more arrogant you become, the more ignorant you actually are, and vice versa. The more arrogant you are, you know, um, you will become more arrogant the more ignorant you are. So it's a two way. We gave Moses the scripture that they may be guided. We made the son of Mary and his mother a sign, and we gave them a refuge on a mesa with food and drink. One God, one religion. O you messengers, eat from the good provisions and work righteousness. I am fully aware of everything you do. Such is your congregation, one congregation, and I am the Lord, you shall reverence me. But they tore themselves into disputing factions, each party happy with what they have. Therefore, just leave them in their while, leave them in the confusion for a while. So, people can take this out of context. As we know, they can take the words and selective emphasis and distortion. But the congregation of one congregation, I mean, this refers to those who uphold the religion as it was, and um, uphold the actual religion of submission. So if you separate yourself from a group of hypocrites, if you separate yourself from, a group that uh, by the Quran, we can judge upon. It's a criterion book. It's exactly how you distinguish the right path from the wrong path. It's exactly, I mean, we do it every day with the fruit. We, I had a grapefruit earlier, of course, when you're peeling it, it's like, okay, it's not mushy, it passes that inspection or judgment. Jesus said you judge a fruit by you judge a tree by its fruit. So in the same way, humans, what they produce, this tree is no good because it has rotten fruit and it continues to produce rotten fruit. You're gonna the farmer who, in these parables is God. He's gonna rip it up and then throw it in the fire, and burn it off because it's not producing anything good. And it's bad, And so I mean, these are just parables and allegories for how the system is. But so people who tear themselves into disputing factions, they separate themselves. Even if they aren't the ones to leave, or if they are the ones to leave, if they, uh, you know, um, that this, people will try to say, oh, brother or sister, don't create division and this and that. No, you have actually divided yourself against the truth. You have taken a stance against God, against his messenger, elevated your opinions above thereof, and then you have just torn yourself into disputing factions. And just because the majority may side with you, or the majority takes this route, uh, doesn't indicate whether you're right or wrong. Because especially as we know from the previous religions throughout time, you know, the majority is always wrong. Always, invariably. I mean, up until these times, we can see the. I mean, and even in context, I mean, even after the victory, I mean, we know from Surah 44 that many of them will revert. After a little while, or many of them will soon revert. But not to get too deep into that. Just going off of what we know from where we came from. The great feud, how humans are, right, and how most people disbelieve, and even out of those who believe, most don't do so without committing some type of vice. What shows the minority? The minority. So, if someone thinking the numbers save them, you might as well go join the church, the mega church up your street, right? If that's your basis, if that's one of your, if it is even a criterion, if it's even a criteria, you could have other good criterions. This person doesn't drink, doesn't commit adultery. But if you use the criterion on the size of a group, you've set yourself for failure right there, and Satan will capitalize it. That's not a basis. In the same way, truth does not need age verification. You know, I was just making that joke here because of the day and age of digital ID, but that's another thing. But truth, it doesn't have a gatekeeper as far as so you could have a child that tells you something, that God could be trying to tell you something to this child. So, but more focusing more back on these points here, and I'll run through we're at 32 minutes, but I'll run through quickly the other verses. But these are an important thing because people have even so-called submitters will try to use this, and in order to stick with people, that have broken themselves away from submission and what the religion is, and elevated their opinions above that of God and his messenger. And that's at the end of Surah 49. There's also Surah 4, verse 65 and verse 80 that says, these are the true believers are the ones who accept God's and the accept that messenger's judgment, amongst your affairs readily, without hesitation, because they know, God is not going to trick you or lead you astray through a messenger. So the messenger tells you something very clear about insurance, and it's a fear-based tactic and this and that. I mean, it's either you can listen to someone who is guided by God and who's specifically chosen to clarify many things that were previously not known to us, as the verses talk about in the Quran, or you can choose to listen to yourself, and really the person I think here who wants to really be saved and God willing is seeking God's forgiveness and mercy is not going to prioritize their opinion over themselves. Only the arrogant prioritize their opinion over the messengers, right? And it's not the messenger's opinion to begin with. So I mean, these that distinguish the people. So if people separate themselves from the religion, uh, they're the ones dividing themselves, right? And then if someone is amongst the group, and the group has taken a position against God, or is upholding inherited traditions, um, you know, just as Moses and Aaron separated themselves from the wicked people, and we can see this is maybe I think it's in Surah 20, or it's how they, when the people said, "Go, you and your Lord fight for," we will sit here, and Moses and Aaron and I think maybe one or two other believers, they separated themselves from such wicked people. Moses even asked God, it says, "My Lord," well, I'm not going to quote exactly, uh, but then these people roamed the earth aimlessly for 40 years. So so in both notes, this is an important thing to clarify. And people will try to use this And notice it's just really Satan working here. Satan is wanting to infect, right? He's wanting to spread disease. His infection. So if you're in a room with a bunch of sick people with like viruses and all these diseases, and you separate yourself. No, Satan doesn't want it. He wants you in there so you can get sick like them, and eventually you go out and you start infecting other people. You know. So this is the other way. It could also be the other way around. If someone's sick that comes into a group of healthy people that are following the religion as it's meant to be followed and upholding God's commandments, the Quran alone, not coming up with these inherited traditions. And a sick person comes in their midst, God will remove them. He'll protect the believers. He'll make it to where that this person, you know, and ultimately, God is a judge, and may God continue to protect us, guide us, and forgive us, and bless our affairs with His guidance. So this was I did spend some extra time on this, but this is I think it's important for people to understand. Therefore, just leave them in their confusion for a while. Do they think that since we provided them with money and children, we must be showering them with blessings? Indeed, they have no idea. So this is another criterion, or some that we should we're told about, like this, having this money and children, because I'm just from some of the things, not that I've witnessed, but I've heard, and even things, I guess, from a non-submission standpoint within the churches and stuff, prior to submission and growing up, they use they flaunt their wealth, and they think that that because they have this business, or this big business, or the pastor, or the youth pastor, or this person within the congregation, has flaunts their wealth in church, that they're blessed by God. And this is actually very, not other things, this is very common, and they have these big families and stuff, and and we must be, and do they think that we must be showering them with blessings? Indeed, they have no idea. So this is not a basis on this is not a basis or parameter on, or indicator on, one's righteousness and obedience to God. This is it's not. And for someone to think like this, I mean, it just shows a lack of knowledge about this, of course, and their ignorance. So moving on, verse 57, surely those who are reverently conscious of their Lord, and who believe in the revelations of their Lord, and who never set up any idols besides their Lord, as they give their charities, their hearts are fully reverent, for they recognize that they will be summoned before their Lord. They are eager to do righteous works, they compete in doing them. So these are traits of the believers. These are traits of those who believe in the day of judgment, right? And I mean, of course, we don't call ourselves believers. We're all submitters here. God knows about our belief, but as far as we're concerned, we're submitters. We have criterion and traits, but I mean, it's best, like, I'm just going off of what was told to us by our messenger, and we're submitters, right? Maybe yeah, unless you're Iranians, right? That was funny. That was funny. Um, yes. Yeah, someone who recognizes that there'll be someone before the Lord. So if information, comes their way, shouldn't matter the age. It shouldn't matter if it's just from one person or two people, or a reminder. If they really took the religion seriously, and especially when it's dealing with something so obvious, like idol worship, it's not uh, it's not even really a debatable topic, especially when the history of such a matter. This is just an example, but when it's out there for you to search, and okay, you're doing something that's like obviously idol worship. I mean, even if I think if you were even had like a little bit of reverence, and if you were like in the bottom of submission, like the lowest ranks, which is still, thank God. I mean, that's a huge blessing. But I mean, you don't want to sit there. I mean, you want to eventually try to get better and move up. But even if you had a little bit of that, you would actually listen if you took your hereafter seriously, like the verse says, those who do not take their religion seriously, we forget them on that day. You would listen to what, these to what somebody's saying, even if it's from a child, because I mean, this is how God works, and we know the messenger was. We can see the example of the messenger and how the messenger says, like, this was a lot of people dropped out, when he announced his messengership, and he says, it seems to me that like this was why he announced, is to affect the test, and I mean, people have egos and all, and the rest is history. We know about these things. So I mean, it's really a sorry case for these people, but we don't feel bad for them because they're doing it to themselves and they're hurting themselves, and it's because they wanna, and they're gonna find out unless they change. They're gonna find on the day of judgment that it wasn't worth it. And that they um, it's like when we just so many examples through the Quran. I mean, just a few that we read about when warners and messengers come, um, and the people turn arrogant. And then when the retribution strikes them, whether it was the next day or 5 or 10 years from now or in the hereafter, I mean, they're going to be very sorry. But anyway, okay, moving on, wrapping up. Um, they're eager to do righteous works to compete in doing. But I already read that. 62, the disbeliever is unappreciative. We never burden any soul beyond its means, and we keep a record that others utters the truth. No one will suffer injustice. Because their minds are oblivious to this, they commit works that do not conform with this, their works are evil. So if you're I mean, you could not, so not just unappreciative for like uh for things like eyesight or etc. Or all these other provisions. But I mean, you could be unappreciative for the Quran. You could be unappreciative for having a messenger come into your midst and be like, oh no, I know better, I'm my own messenger, my opinion is better than. I mean, even if you think it's his opinion, for example, you know which is not. But even if you think that, like, don't put your opinion above that of God and His messenger. Surah 49. I mean, like, it's amazing how easily people that read the Quran, they know them, they listen, to things, and they just don't get it. They don't really they can't be believers. They can't really believe that He's a messenger. Else God would prepare. I think God would prepare their hearts, right, to readily accept, what He says and be happy. You know, not trust in these worldly, satanic systems like insurance. And this is just one thing. I mean, we have circumcision, a lot of these other things, but disbelievers are appreciative, so they're also unappreciative for the Quran, and they could be unappreciative for guidance that comes to them, right? So if someone reminds you, like, hey man, like, you're not doing this right, or your prayers are wrong, or you'd be thankful, like, oh man, like, because you realize, like, thank God this person is telling me that I'm not saying this right in my prayer, I'm doing this wrong, or even if it's a little nuance, you'd be thankful because you realize, like, man, I want my prayer to actually be effective. I want to get credit for it. Uh it's like you put a coin in a machine, and then this person tells you how to get, like, the maximum amount of candies out, versus like your coin is a glitch or error or something, and like you're like, no, 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 I don't want to get all my coins worth. You know what I mean? But anyway, that's just an example. But yeah, so I mean, we can see that. Uh, their works do not conform with this. Don't conform with the truth, right? The truth that God tells us in the Quran, and it's very straightforward. But um, but okay. So with that, if there's any comments or questions, please feel free. We all kind of went over time. But if there's any comments, please feel free. Thank you.
Inshallah, thank you.
MashaAllah, brother.
Inshallah, John, thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, one thing we notice regarding verse, uh, is it verse? Uh, Sorry, I lost the verse. I think it was the word says, yeah, this is verse 24, uh, and it says, "This is no more than a human being like you." About they said about Noah, who wants to gain prominence among you. You know, so like they think that the messenger of God here, Noah, when he's reminding the people as a messenger from God who wants to help them save their souls, they think that he's doing this just to be popular or just to be like the leader, to gain prominence, so that he could, be like in some kind of position of authority. I mean, this is the sentiment that you get from the disbelievers, when they are invited to the truth. So I think it's pretty interesting that it mentions that here when you think about it. Like when you try to remind someone, if they have a big ego and they don't want to accept, they'll come up with these types of excuses, just to avoid the responsibility. I first became a submitter. I found these verses like very helpful to help me reflect on God. I mean, I still find them helpful, but like when you also read them, it reminds us of the things that we see every day, around us, like the blessings we see every day. But prior to reading the Quran, like we would barely reflect on these blessings that God is talking about here, and we don't pay attention to all these things, like we just heedlessly, like animals, just look at these things and just move on. But when you see, for example, when God talks about here, like orchards of great palms and grapes, and all kinds of fruits and various foods, when you think about them, like, and how, like in other verses, for example, it talks about fruits that are similar yet dissimilar, like they look like they have the same shapes, or sometimes they even look alike, but inside their chemistry is completely different. Something like an olive that may look like grapes, you know in this case, God mentions both of them, and they're completely different, and one is oily, one is like watery and sweet, the other one's oily and like salty or bitter, in some way, and have completely different nutritional breakdown. Like one is just probably like sugar and vitamins, and the other one would be like so many other things. And so like all this, reflect on. And then subhanallah, I mean, God talks about the livestock. We drink milk, we consume dairy products every day, all of us, unless you're a vegetarian, which you're not a submitter then. And then, you drink, you consume all these dairy products, and you eat the meat and have all these other benefits from them, including clothes that we wear, all these things. We don't reflect on it. Like when we wear clothes, like we never think about, thank God, he created these animals, these livestock, so we can have these nice, comfortable clothings that, provide us with warmth, as God says, and luxury and all these things, and God is showing us these things, reminding us of these things so that we can reflect on it, and thank God for it, And when we do that, we're remembering God, we're growing our soul, and that becomes a very important piece of how we can make God our God every single day, like so that's like the important, very important piece of our day to day, you know, um, thought process and perspectives, like we have to train ourselves to think about our surroundings like that. When you're just like, say, when you're drinking coffee, just don't drink coffee and mindlessly like think about the coffee, like God grew these coffee beans somewhere, and how did all of that happen? You have the dairy in it, of course, on top of it. God created these animals, and you thank God for it. Like, I mean, He has created all these things in our service, and don't just be heedless.
Mashallah, brother. Very good reminders. And the Messenger of the Covenant tells also about these
Mhm.
things, right? Like
Yeah.
he gives us so much details about what we need to do. And I was always wondering why God was always giving these examples on, about the heavens, the mountains, the stars, everything that He has created. But now it makes really sense and we can understand after learning exactly what the system is, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of people, they don't know the system. They don't know if you die miserable, you're going to get to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
These type of things. And knowing the exact truth, the proven exact truth, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
God has made it in such a way that He didn't only tell us what's the truth, but He is also proving it with the miracle of 19. There was this discussion I had. I went to that was, well, in Ramadan. Yeah, it was still Ramadan, and I went to this place, basically a place where all my old friends came when like the youth of this Sunni mosque, and now they're all grown up men and they have their families and children, etc. So after a very long time, I didn't see them. I was, of course, talking about the miracle of 19, and I was giving the message and giving so much information about 19. Eventually, one of the things that struck me is that they were like asking, but so what? Like, what does this 19 do, and why are you? Why is this so relevant and so important? And like, as if this 19 is not so relevant for them.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying, yeah, okay, it's a miracle, so what? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what
Uh-huh.
does it do? Because they don't understand what it really does. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like this physical evidence that God has given us as an evidence for everything that we know now, right? It's not like, this is so amazing that we even have this mathematical structure for how many units we need to pray, including the Friday prayers. And of course, all the miracles that are written down in the Quran, it proves all these miracles, all these previous miracles. It makes everything a fact, actually, right? Like, if you could think about it, this is like, this is such an amazing miracle. When God talks about for example, the example you have given about the olive, like,
Mm-hmm.
God talks about these things
Mm-hmm.
for a person who doesn't really reflect about it, especially if they don't know about this mathematical system behind all these verses, right? They would see something very simple behind it. They would think, yeah, okay, like, yeah, so what, and
Yeah, like it, like right. Everything will start to become magical to them, like when
mm,
they apply. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, like yes, right.
yeah, the
Right.
point is, like, um like, the whole point is about, like, the way you said about reflecting it, right? Like, reflecting, in what I have learned at least, is like to go into these depths of what God has given us, so we can reflect. Like, for example, the miracle of 19 is like this very good example. It's very complicated, but still actually very simple to understand, right? Like, it's actually very simple to know what the system does, but in it, it's extremely complicated, and this is how God has made it, because no one can make similar,
So I
right?
don't know.
It's like, it's impossible. And then, um, we thinking about it in this depth, about the smallest things, like the example Suleiman gave, for example, the olive. It's not that simple, actually, but this gives us the idea of how great God is, right? And one of the examples I'm always thinking of, like when I think about God, is I'm imagining, um, 1 square meter, or 1 cubic meters of space, and how much molecules there are, how much atoms there are in that one square meter space, right? And then, if you can imagine how big space is, like, and God is controlling everything. And sometimes when I watch the TV and I look at, National Geographic, and then you have these videos where they are showing, like, somewhere in the world there is this river, and then I'm thinking, like, in that river there is this one rock, and under that rock there is this one small fish, or maybe one small uh,
Yeah, for sure.
animal that we don't even see with our eyes, and that
Even though, yeah,
immensely small animal is being fed by God, and He's giving him the ability to live and to like move. Like, this is so immense, right? And I think we should think like this.
Yeah.
We should think about all these small details so we can understand how amazing God is, right? Like, the more you think about these things, the more we realize, um, we know about God,
Oh,
right?
great. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when we know God is running everything, He's doing everything. Like, so okay, that specific small fish, and maybe you have trillions and trillions of those animals, and they were living
Yeah,
there
and
for
then right,
millions of years, maybe. Yeah.
like up there somewhere, and it's like the metal atoms and stuff, and I'm like, God is fully aware of what's going on, and He's controlling the atoms in the boat, and then like all the way to the storm on Jupiter, like all the way, like so far away, such a great distance, and and then like these like the the eye of the storm on Jupiter, it's like a hurricane. I
Hmm.
think that's about the size of the Earth.
Yeah.
Like he's aware
Bigger than
of
the
all
Earth,
these
yeah.
things, like all the way out there, and it's like he's maintaining. I was just thinking, like, man, I wonder what it looks like. Like,
Hmm.
I know there's lightning, and I'm just like thinking, like, God's fully aware of what's going on in that specific storm and everything else. And then it's like, man, this is what, like, we're so lucky to have God. Um, we're so lucky to have God, and yeah, I like those examples, especially with
Hmm.
olive too.
Mhm.
That's a really good one because yeah, I mean, you put like two, like it's the same soil, it's the same water, it's the
Mhm.
same
Hmm.
molecules in the air, and like
Hmm.
anything else, like you would like an olive,
Hmm.
and not it's not the tree isn't just different or the like
And
magical,
in
like
in God's system, that that's why the messenger of the covenant, he gives the example. He says, like, when you eat an apple, don't just eat the apple without thinking about God, how God created it, and about the color and the smell, right? Like, these are all, now we can understand like why God was giving all these examples, is basically for the submitters who know the system, that by remembering it in this manner, like connecting everything to God, this grows your soul. Because you have also so many
my
scientists,
dad.
yes, but
I heard he was always
he doesn't
wicked.
reflect about God.
But anyways, yeah. He used to mock God and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I heard he was always like wicked. At least what my
Mm-hmm.
parents told me about him. My dad used to like. Well, no, I'm not gonna say what my dad used to say about him. But
Yeah. So it's important to, of course, think about all these things, but I think the most important part is that we connect all these things with God, that we know that God is doing everything, or else the soul of um, what was his name again? I forgot. Um, um,
Huh?
the guy
Stephen
who landed
Hawkins?
on the Stephen.
Hawkins.
Steve,
Yeah,
Stephen.
Stephen Hawkins. Yeah.
Stephen Hawkins.
So yeah, if it was only by thinking about these things that would grow your soul, yeah, he would have an immense soul as well. But yeah, so like the whole point is like connected with God, of course. That's going to help.
Yeah. I mean, we have to do our religious practices, to grow our soul. On top of it, I mean, the belief in God, plus thinking of God, obviously being Him, having God on our minds, and doing the deeds to grow our souls on top of that
Hmm.
is what will, you know, make people go to heaven, or provide they're not idol worshippers. You know,
Hmm.
which you have idol worshippers
They
who
also think about
who
God,
think
but
about
yeah.
God. They do their practices. They even do deeds, but then they commit idol worship and nullifies everything.
Hmm. I was always wondering when I was like a small kid, like, why is God giving these examples about like the olive, for example, or the
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah,
some
I mean, olives
animals.
are amazing. A source of nutrition. I mean, it has so many benefits. Like, I mean, you can't, produce something like that artificially. Like for example, think of like olive oil, right? I mean, imagine if we had like some chemicals, synthetic material that if someone produced in a lab. I mean, nobody would come near it, like petrol or something, right?
Mhm.
I mean, subhanallah, I mean, so many benefits. It has anti-inflammatory, antioxidant benefits, and rich in so many good cholesterol. I mean, good. What is it called? LDL.
Yeah, it
Uh,
keeps you young.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So
Also, you can use it. You use it for liver flushes.
yeah, yeah, exactly. If you
Your
have like
brother's.
kidney, I mean, liver, gallstones or something like that. I mean, it will help your body, like purify your body from those things, like digestive health. You have like brain function. Um, Also heart health. All these things. It Yeah, it has a lot of omega 3 and omega 6 fatty acids, which is good for the brain and everything.
By the way, we were talking about this.
That is AI. No, I'm just kidding.
We were talking about
AI has a lot to catch up, brother. I'm just kidding.
I wasn't AI. Joke.
I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
about the specific. Um, I don't know if we should call it a medicine, but like something that helps you focus more. I remember you were talking about it. Like, can we consider that as a good thing?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, you remember, right? You were
Like, you mean, like if you actually have a medicine that helps you focus for your brain?
no, not a medicine. You have these things, right? Like you can take, yeah, and then it helps you focus more.
Right. I mean, it's as long as it's not an
A
intoxicant
supplement.
that doesn't alter your judgment ability to judge things. Like, it doesn't make you lose your ability to judge. Like
No, it makes it even
doesn't
better.
intoxicate you,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's not like you can't take anything that doesn't alter your brain chemistry in any way. Like for example, if you take olive oil, right, it's good for the brain. It does things to your body, so that's fine, right? But where we draw the line in submission with intoxicants is, when you take something that
Alters your
alters your
judgment.
judgment in a way where you can't tell the difference between good and bad and right and wrong, things that will do that, right?
Okay.
Like drinking alcohol, or taking other chemicals, for example, that will change your brain in a way that you can't process your thoughts correctly,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be obviously prohibited, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think you mean these things which you put in your mouth, right, Jafar?
I don't know
They,
like
or
exactly
not?
what it was, but
Cigarette.
I remember Suleiman was talking about it, and then
You know, they
uh,
don't use cigarettes, but they put it in their mouths to get the I don't know
no,
nicotine,
that's nicotine. No, I'm
Is
not
it
talking about that. I'm
but
talking
there
about
nic-
are
like
nic-
different ones. You can
nicotine patches?
yeah, but there are different ones.
No, he's talking about things that help you focus.
Yeah,
yes,
Or we're
yes,
talking about
focus
nicotine
more.
patches.
No, no, it's not nicotine. No,
Yeah.
that
Well,
doesn't
I
help
mean,
you
I'll just tell
focus.
you this: like, come on, I just like in a U.S. culture or American culture. Whenever I hear that all my through college and stuff, it was always pharmaceutical stuff like drugs, like amphetamine based. And seemingly a lot of my friends. I'm not saying we're talking about that, but that's just the first thing that when I hear somebody say that, immediately it just reminds me of like high
Yeah,
school
but
and some of these things. Because
yeah,
there's also things like modafinil that like modafinil, I think that is not as powerful, or it's still like a synthetic chemical, and it helps you focus, and it doesn't really like I don't know. I mean, I guess it's arguable, but
Yeah, so brother Jaffer, like you're saying like if someone takes stuff that helps their brain, like natural things to
Like
help with
not
their
natural, like
yeah, is
instant.
that what
Like
you're
oh,
saying,
like
brother?
chemicals, like
yeah, like
chemical,
chemicals.
like
Yes.
Yeah,
medicine. Like you
yeah,
go to a
instant
doctor and he
would
gives
have
you
to
a
be
medicine
chemical,
to
right?
focus better, right?
Yeah,
Like
or
let's
you
say he
can
give
buy
you like
from.
certain kinds of
Yeah,
vitamin, or you can buy, yeah. So you have, I mean, like of course you have to do some verification, right? For example, like what does this thing do to your
Mm-hmm.
body and stuff? If you see it's healthy, it doesn't have any detrimental effects to your brain like addiction and
Mm.
like help making you insane later on in life. You know,
Yeah.
then you can obviously take it.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, but like
Yeah,
benefits, like
yeah.
not addicted, and it's like it helps. Yeah, because there's things like they sell vitamin combinations in Costco. My parents used to get it, and even at Walmart. Like there's this one that was kind of expensive. I mean, you can get them at Amazon. I'm sure formulation change, but they have a lot of these minerals and nutrients, and they actually work. Like this one was expensive, like $40 or $50, but my parents would give it to me before like these big exams, and I would retain. Like I take, you're supposed to take two the night before, and they look like multivitamin capsules, like, and they are like they're pretty much brain vitamins, and they do work, but it takes time, like you have to take it the day before, like two, and then take four in the morning of, or that's just maybe what my parents recommended or found what works for them, and it does work like you do, or at least for me, it wasn't placebo because like retain at least short term, I guess, to get you through your test, you have really good memory. So yeah, that stuff like that, that's good. And is that kind of what you're talking about? Are you talking about like immediate, like you take something and it like it
Maybe
you're
it means cut. You know, this Yemeni people or Somalian people
No,
take.
that's
You mean that?
drugs.
Maybe you
That's
mean
drugs.
that.
Yeah. No, I've seen
uh,
some on the internet. People are just using it. Like Joey Rogan had one. I remember
Joe Rogan
Joe Rogan. Yeah, and then
had
but he was
what?
he.
was it like
Yeah.
was it a nootropic is what or
Or
something?
maybe I don't know. I don't remember the
Is
name.
it
It was
Because
Shilajit?
even nootropics,
Was it Shilajit or no? Something else.
no, I don't remember the name, but I remember
Okay.
him saying that it
Okay.
really helped
Yeah.
focus and
Okay.
then
So,
that.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, in a nutshell, we're just talking about intoxicants that are prohibited, right? Things that will affect your judgment,
Mm-hmm.
where you can't. Let's say you take it and you can't tell if the in front of you it's a tree or a person. Like sometimes you think
Mm-hmm.
it's a tree, sometimes you think it's a person,
Mm-hmm.
or you're not able to make moral decisions. Things like that. So obviously, you will not take those things. You may smoke, right? And they think because smoking is not an intoxicant that is fine, like, and they encourage each other to smoke, and this they're submitters, right? But of course you're not doing something that's prohibited per se, like it's not quote unquote haram and stuff, but you're still doing minor of things, like you're being unappreciative. You could be wasting money, hurting your body, of course, hurting your lungs and stuff. Just so I mean, if you know these things about something, then you have to keep in consideration that you're being appreciative of the body God has given you. There could be things, for example, that you might take that have maybe some short-term benefits, right? But then long-term, let's say your kidneys will fail or something. So there's a like very big chance that like both your kidneys will fail. So you probably want to stay away from that, right? Because in the Quran, God doesn't tell us like exhaustively like each and every chemical that is bad for us, right? So, but God says, eat from the earth that
The
is
good
lawful
ones.
and good,
Yeah.
So use your best judgment, and just make sure that it doesn't intoxicate you.
Yeah, makes sense. Mashallah.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, the verses talk about like 34, 35, and 36, like they say, does he promise you that after you die and become dust and bones, will you come out again? Impossible, impossible indeed is what is promised to you. We only live this life, we live and die, and we will never be resurrected. So that's the major issue with every human being, because, and that's how God is using it to test us, right? I mean, um, we God could create a system where we wouldn't have to go through this other death, you know, and but this becomes for people, this becomes a test of believing in God's omnipotence in a way, right? Because they don't believe in God's omnipotence, they don't believe in the scripture that this was going to happen. They just see what they see in front of them, right? And this is what distinguishes a believer from a hypocrite. Like a lot of people will become submitters to God initially. God talks about the hypocrites, and God says as soon as it begins to shed light around them, God takes away their light, leaving them in darkness, unable to see, because like they have these doubts, and the doubts are there. Then we have to be able to conquer these doubts. Like if somebody's says that they believe in the hereafter, but in their hearts, like they're not really sure, like they must address those doubts, by talking through those doubts, like for example, like when the messenger of the covenant talks about believing in the messengership, like he says, like, okay, give me one reason why you think I'm not a messenger, or why I couldn't be a messenger or can't be a messenger. And so, like in the same way, like why can't give me one reason why you think God cannot recreate you. If you were nothing and you were a tiny drop, or you were not even anything, you were non-existent practically in this on this earth before you were born. And God created you and brought you out as a conscious, independent, autonomous human being. Then why would you think that if he did it once and he's doing it over and over for every single person through generations, that why can't he redo it? And they say no, it's impossible. And so why do they think it's impossible? Like why let's say, why should I think that it's impossible? If I see it happening in front of me, if I put a seed in the ground and it bears a tree, and then it has its seeds, and I put that seed in there and it grows another tree again. So you see the duplication happening in that sense, right? Also, and God does it over and over and over. Like, why do people think that God cannot do it again?
Yeah, because they actually don't believe in God eventually, right? Like, because if you believe in God, that means like you know who God is, and that He's capable of
Mhm.
doing anything and everything He wants.
Mhm.
So that reflects actually their
Mhm. Yeah,
true
and look,
identities. Yeah.
in verse 38, they're accusing the messenger to that he has fabricated lies against God. Like that's such a huge offense, right? I mean, when you see people, and we're talking about hypocrites now, right? So it also applies to that. He when their doubts will overtake them, they'll say, "No, we don't believe the hereafter exists." And this guy, he's just making stuff up and he's attributing it to God. Like when they say, for example, this is the messenger's, this is his opinion. Like that's a nice way of saying it. Without coming off as a real hypocrite.
Dude, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's yeah, exactly, dude. That's a nice way of saying it without coming, dude. That's exactly what they're doing, and they
Mhm,
try to dress it up and trick people. But really,
mhm,
yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm like,
mhm,
man, do you have any idea like what level of crime,
mhm,
like sin you're committing? And
mhm,
I mean, would you say this to the messenger's face if he was here? And then I mean, and we also know, like the enemies of Rashad, like we know what he told them, we have videos of how he deepened in the
Mhm.
third, the final conference, and I'm like, dude, you're doing the same exact thing as these people. So do you think you're anything? Do you think he would like pat you on the back and it's like, oh, thank you for like no, like
Mhm.
why are you? Yeah, yeah, it's these they think they know better,
Mhm.
or they want to hold on to their they feel safe with their whatever thing, and
Mhm.
they like, oh, he,
Mhm.
it's a devil's trap. There's enough bait for
Mhm.
people where like things, like the messenger talked about how Satan can take certain statements and mislead the people. And so they're like, oh, look, opinions. Rashad said if it's something about my,
Mhm.
it's like, no, he's just saying that like as a, it's like if somebody it's just somebody comes and works on your house and then they have or works on your teeth and says, look, blah blah blah, and then, redo it. But it doesn't mean they're gonna do a bad job. Like they're just giving you, I don't know if that's a good example.
Mhm.
Like they do a good job and
Mhm.
they do a perfect job and everything they did
Mhm.
was good and truthful. And then if you're using, that as a way to escape, I guess, from submitting to everything that God has told us and obeying, and it's
Mhm.
just too bad for these
Mhm.
people. You know.
Yeah, exactly. And then I
Like
think it
these are
also
people that
reminds
don't
me.
don't really believe.
Mhm. Yeah, and then also reminds me
Yeah,
of
go
the other
ahead, bro.
verse. No, that's fine. It also reminds me of the other verse where um, God says, that when they're told that you should follow this, they become arrogantly indignant, and of course they become rejectors. But if when they come to the messenger, but they say if the judgment's in their favor, they readily accept it, right? So they pick and choose what they want to
Yeah,
accept
yeah,
from the
exactly.
messenger.
Right. And in the next verse, I think it says, "Is there a disease in their hearts? Are they? Is that the following?
Hmm.
Are they doubtful? Is there a disease in their hearts?"
Hmm.
I think that's is that the next one? Let me see if yeah, okay. However, if the judgment is in their favor, they readily accept it. Yeah, yeah. Is there a disease in their hearts? Are they down? You know
Hmm.
how I remember that part, bro? It's the same thing I told you this morning. Mashallah. It's one of the
Hmm.
benefits of your recitation, subhanAllah.
So yeah,
And I can
right. You
yeah, I
remember?
was I was like I was like
Yeah.
yeah. SubhanAllah. Yeah,
Hmm.
are they afraid that God and his messenger may treat them unfairly? In fact, it is they who are unjust. Believers unhesitatingly, next verse, believers unhesitatingly obey God and his messenger. The only utterance of the believers when invited to God and his messenger to judge in their affairs is to say, we hear and we obey. These are the winners. Yeah, so I mean, it's like people
Hmm.
don't.
Yeah, and I posted this verse from this morning in the chat on WhatsApp also, from I think this is 43:22. And so like uh yeah, like based on the discussion we were having earlier, people are weak. So I guess if someone insults you badly, in a way that they want to break you down, in a way, like shatter your confidence, and that's what they're deliberately trying to do, and like discredit you and stuff, publicly. I mean, you have to work on yourself to get over it, right? As a human being, like it's not like we're robots and like someone says something and no, it just doesn't bother us because we're submitters. No, it bothers, in a way, and this is why God says, like, you know, the messenger talks about it too, is like the people in the first generation, you know, the people who are persecuted, they have a special place in heaven for them because of the persecution that they go through, you know, because of these things. And like in that, you know, one audio from the messenger of the covenant too, where, you know, this guy was calling the other guy, Adib was calling the other guy a liar, you know, he says, "You're a liar." And the messenger, you know, he really, uh, he really, I mean, he really made a point on this to say, you know, hey, you know, this guy is not gonna sleep tonight, you know, because you called him these things, you know. So, like, I'm just paraphrasing how he said it, you know. So, like, these things are difficult, and so, like, when I woke, like, I went to sleep really late. After I saw the last message that you know was posted about you, was directed at you primarily. Like, I didn't sleep for like I was about to go to no, I was about to do something else. Never mind. And like it really infuriated me in a way. And then when I woke up in the morning, I was still thinking about it. I did my prayer. I remember distinctively remember I did my salat, you know, and I'm sitting on the prayer. I'm still thinking about it. And then I go open the Quran, like just my morning verses. I'm reading sequentially, and then I just opened the Quran randomly. I mean, when I say randomly, I mean where I last opened it, right, and read it. So I go to the next page right after that, you know, because that's where I'm reading from. And the verses came up. The first verse that came up was this one, you know, inherited traditions condemned, which was the verse I had been thinking of before, actually. And I had read it as part of the argument, but I never posted that verse in my discussion. But in the morning, subhanAllah, I mean that verse just really stood out right away in front of me. Like I was like, subhanAllah, like you know, God is showing us, you know, all these signs, you know, to also strengthen us, right? When
Definitely.
we, yeah, mashallah.
MashaAllah.
Mashallah, yeah, that's very awesome.
It's direct
Yeah,
from.
that's a very God that he does. Yeah, fraud and insurance. Cause right, yeah, I've like wondered like different things like that at times too. I'm like, man, are we? I was even kind of having the same thoughts at one point. Like, I think when I was rereading Ghaffari's, you know, the guy's message, you know, his condescending stuff, and then his or should I have said his name out loud, or it's fine.
You already said
I
it.
guess
It's
it
fine.
doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, most people don't know him by their last name,
I
anyways.
don't think.
Yeah, most
Yeah.
people use the first,
Right.
but yeah.
Yeah. So. Right. Right. Okay. Yeah. So. Yeah, and then you know the condescending and patronizing. I was rereading. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like man, it's like what if I was rereading? I'm
Mm-hmm.
like man, it's like what if you know? And like no, like the thing that got me back like on track. I'm like no,
Mm-hmm.
and like people and a lot of people aren't. I think like it reminded me of the same thing. Like they wanna have their little fun and enjoyment and you know what blah 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 you know, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, just like no, like any kind of idol worship, like get rid of it. I said, like this is the right path, like this is the right way to be, and you can't go wrong. You can't give Satan a claim over it. But I said by, you know, but so right there, I'm like, okay, no, he's. I said what we're, you know, what they're doing is wrong, and then some things like I'll see, but like something like what I was saying, like it was very uh, clear, especially yesterday when all that, and then when you told me, you know, yes, I think it was
Mm-hmm.
yesterday morning or something or afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
mashallah.
thank God for
God gives us these signs so He may be submitters. They're all doing it. They do it collectively to be submitters. They're all doing it. They do it collectively. You know, they exchange gifts or whatever. You know, they have these gifts or whatever. You know, they have these elaborate celebrations where they bring all those things and they take pictures.